Sometimes fate whispers softly, and sometimes it shouts at the top of its lungs. That's what happened to our protagonist. One unexpected Sunday at a quiet cemetery turned a billionaire's cold solitude into the beginning of a heartwarming family story. This is a tale of how pain gives way to love, fear transforms into trust, and an empty mansion fills with a child's laughter and the aroma of homemade baking. Prepare to empathize, be amazed, and believe in miracles with us. If such stories touch your heart, support our channel Unbelievable but True. Subscribe and hit the bell to never miss new life-changing stories with unexpected twists. Thank you for being with us. James Harrison, a renowned entrepreneur, sat in his office in a grand mansion on the outskirts of Boston. This house once echoed with the sounds of joy, parties, and family gatherings. But for the past 5 years, it had been cloaked in cold silence. Everything changed after the tragic death of his only son, Michael. Beyond the wide window stretched a meticulously manicured lawn tended by gardeners. In the distance lay a park with ancient oaks and maples, bordered by a wrought iron fence and guarded gates. Yet all this wealth and luxury brought James no comfort. He gazed at the photographs on his desk. There was Michael, smiling, holding a fishing rod by a riverbank. Beside him stood James, still young, vibrant, and confident as a father. Back then, it seemed no misfortune could shatter their perfect world. But 5 years ago, James's life changed forever. Michael died in a car accident, returning late one evening from a night out with friends. That day drained all color from James's life. No amount of money, connections, or success could help him. What was lost was irreplaceable. From then on, the entrepreneur became withdrawn, cold, and hardened. He buried himself in work, as if seeking salvation in business. But every Sunday, he took a bouquet of white lilies, Michael's favorite flowers, and visited the cemetery. It was his only unwavering ritual, a sign that his heart still harbored pain and that his life wasn't solely a meaningless pursuit of success. The cemetery was a half-hour drive from the mansion, nestled in a secluded part of the city. That day was overcast and windy, with a light drizzle falling. Arriving at the old iron gates, James stepped out of his black sedan, adjusted the collar of his expensive coat, and, clutching the lilies, walked slowly along the gravel path among modest tombstones and marble monuments. Few ventured here in such weather, and James's footsteps echoed distinctly, alone. He liked this cemetery, remote, quiet, with tall trees that rustled in the fall and shaded from the summer sun. Here rested his son, Michael Harrison, a young man who didn't live to see 20. Approaching the familiar gravestone, James paused. The black granite slab, inscribed with Michael James Harrison, 1995 to 2018, struck his heart like a blow each time. He knelt, placed the lilies at the base, and touched the cool stone. A gust of wind brought the rustle of leaves from nearby trees, and James closed his eyes for a moment. "Hello, son," he whispered. "Another Sunday. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." At that moment, a faint rustle broke the silence. James looked up and noticed someone sitting nearby, near another grave. Peering closer, he saw a boy, about 10 years old, in a tattered jacket, his boots caked with mud. The boy sat cross-legged, seemingly staring straight at Michael's gravestone. James tensed. This was a private, guarded cemetery. How did a child get here on such a dreary day? Frowning, he stood up. "Hey kid," he called, striding closer. "What are you doing here?" The boy flinched, like a startled animal, and bolted. James heard only the snap of branches, the crunch of gravel, and a faint creak. The child darted away, slipping behind an old tree, and vanished in an instant. Surprised and slightly uneasy, James scanned the area where the boy had fled. He'd never seen stray children here before. There were hardly any residents nearby. On the drive back to his car, James puzzled over who the boy could be. The thought that someone was visiting Michael's grave unsettled him. But even more disturbing was the image of the child, shabbily dressed, frightened, with a desperate look in his eyes. Did he have no family? How did he end up in such a place? That night, James couldn't sleep. He tossed in his large bed, listening to the wind howling outside, and tried in vain to distract himself with reading. But the boy's image lingered in his mind. There was something oddly familiar in his eyes, his gaze, something that tugged at the most vulnerable part of his soul. An hour passed, then another. James tried to read, but the words blurred before his eyes. The mansion's silence was broken only by the occasional patter of raindrops on the glass. Finally, around 3 in the morning, he got up, went to his study, and pulled out his phone. He needed someone who could find answers to such mysteries. "Victor," he said into the phone when it was answered after a few rings. "I need you to find someone. A boy, about 10. I saw him at the cemetery." "Yes, at Michael's grave. Find out who he is and how he got there." Details in the morning. Victor was his trusted aide and private investigator. Once in charge of the company's security, he now handled more delicate tasks. Reliable, efficient, and discreet, Victor could navigate any corner of society without causing a stir. Hanging up, James felt a slight relief. At least he was doing something. Heading to the living room, he lit the fireplace, mechanically watching the flames dance on the logs. Eventually, he dozed off in an armchair, sinking into a heavy, anxious sleep. Morning greeted James with exhaustion and a nagging sense that he hadn't slept at all, but he knew Victor was already on the case. The investigator asked no unnecessary questions, just acted. James trusted him. If anyone could find the boy, it was Victor. Start with the cemetery's security. They should have cameras, James instructed when Victor arrived at the mansion. Talk to people living nearby. Maybe someone saw the boy. Victor nodded, donned his signature leather coat, and set off. That day, James had important negotiations with foreign partners, a major deal promising to boost his company's capital. In the past, he'd have thrown himself into work, but now he was distracted, constantly checking his phone for updates from Victor. The meeting felt suspended, with James listening to his partner's words and the translator's voice mechanically, his thoughts circling the mysterious boy. He recalled conversations with Michael when his son was alive. Michael had once been a child, and James had been his whole world. But at some point, things went wrong. James dove into business, growing distant from his son. Now, after the loss, only regret remained. By the end of the day, Victor called, reporting that he'd checked the cemetery's security footage, but it was too dark and blurry due to the rain and late hour. However, a few witnesses, a worker from a nearby car wash and a woman from a house close by, had seen a boy wandering near the cemetery on different days. They called him Tommy, or so they thought. He sometimes rummaged through trash bins for food. Rumor had it he lived nearby with his mother, but no one knew much about her. "We need to look in the eastern outskirts," Victor concluded. "That area is full of abandoned buildings and unfinished projects. They might be holed up in some empty warehouse." "Keep going," James said firmly. "I need you to find him and his mother. The sooner, the better." For the next few days, Victor immersed himself in the search. He scoured Boston's outskirts, talked to residents of old houses, checked basements and attics, and reached out to police contacts for information on women with children who might be homeless or on the radar of social services. The leads were fragmented. Victor learned the boy's mother was named Emily, about 30, looking worn out, often seen at soup kitchens for the homeless. It seemed they were hiding from someone or feared being separated. The source of their fear was unclear, perhaps tied to poverty and constant drifting. James grew increasingly anxious, though he tried to hide it. A sudden tremor gripped him. Could this be connected to Michael? The boy was at Michael's grave, after all. The thought tormented him. Either Tommy and Emily had some mysterious link to Michael's past, or it was just a coincidence. But the idea of someone lingering at his son's memorial unnerved him. Throughout the week, James woke at night, consumed by thoughts of Tommy. He recalled the boy's eyes, filled with a strange, aching longing. There was resolve and pain in them, reminiscent of Michael as a child, stubbornly chasing what he wanted despite obstacles. Soon, Victor called late one evening, saying he'd found the mother and boy. They were hiding in a dilapidated warehouse on the edge of an industrial zone. Without hesitation, James got into his car and drove to the address Victor provided. He'd never been to this part of town. The roads were potholed, the lighting dim. Empty lots and abandoned factories surrounded him. Some buildings were crumbling, covered in graffiti. This part of the city felt forgotten. James's sleek car stood out amid the desolation, drawing glances from the few passers-by. Victor waited at the entrance to a massive brick building, now little more than walls and drafts. There was no security, of course. Inside, it smelled of dust and dampness, with plaster fragments crunching underfoot. "They're in there," Victor said, pointing to a far corner. "Living right on the cold floor. They've made a sort of bed from cardboard and old blankets. James nodded, tense, and entered. It was dark and damp. In the far corner, near a boarded-up window, a faint candle flickered. In its dim light, he saw a woman's figure, thin, with a weary face. Beside her stood the boy. As they spotted James, the boy shrank back, as if ready to flee again. "Easy, it's okay," James said softly, trying not to scare them further. "My name's James Harrison. I saw you at the cemetery." The boy stayed silent, and the woman, Emily, sighed. She looked exhausted and frightened. Despite their hardships, she'd held on for her son. Now, with a powerful stranger appearing, she must have felt her world collapsing. "What do you want from us?" she asked quietly, instinctively shielding Tommy. "We haven't done anything wrong." "I don't think you've done anything wrong," James replied, softening his tone. "I just want to understand why your son was at my son's grave." He noticed Emily's lips tremble slightly at the mention of "my son," and Tommy pressed closer to her, but no answer came. A heavy silence settled, broken only by the drip of water from the cracked ceiling. "Listen," James added, "I don't mean you any harm. If you need help, I'm ready to offer it." Tommy lifted his gaze for the first time. In the dim light, James caught something hauntingly familiar in his eyes, and the feeling intensified when Tommy spoke. "You're the man who brings lilies?" he asked quietly. Michael loved lilies. James nodded, stunned. "Yes, he did. But how do you know his name was Michael?" Tommy glanced at his mother, as if waiting for her to explain. Emily's hands fidgeted nervously. "You see, I didn't know how to tell you. Michael, we were together once. I was pregnant with Tommy when Michael died in the accident, never knowing he'd be a father." Her words hit James like a thunderbolt. He froze, his mind reeling. What does she mean? Michael was her boyfriend? Is Tommy Michael's son? A wild mix of disbelief, shock, and sudden hope surged in James's chest. He looked at Emily, her eyes brimming with tears, then at Tommy. Studying the boy closer, he saw familiar features, the shape of his face, the way his eyes held that same determined glint Michael had. "Wait," James whispered, his voice breaking. "You're saying he's my grandson?" Emily nodded, covering her face with her hand as if bracing for his reaction. Tommy stood silently, glancing between her and James, not fully grasping the weight of the moment, but sensing its tension. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered. "I didn't know who to turn to after Michael died. When I learned who you were, I was scared you wouldn't believe me. Or worse, you'd take Tommy away, thinking I was after your money. I just tried to survive." James lowered his head. A storm of emotions raged within, the raw pain of loss, rekindled, and astonishment. Michael hadn't known he was going to be a father. And now, standing before James was a child carrying his son's blood. "So you've been hiding all this time?" he asked quietly, steadying his trembling voice. "Why Michael's grave?" Emily sighed heavily. Tommy felt a connection to that place. "I told him a little about Michael, just that his father was buried there. On days when I was struggling, he'd slip away to the cemetery. I didn't know at first. He said he wanted to be close to his dad, even if just at his grave." James looked at Tommy. His heart churned with pity, confusion, and a quiet joy at discovering a living link to his son, alongside the realization of how much time had been lost. "How old is Tommy?" he asked, aware he didn't even know this basic fact. "He's 10, Emily replied. "Born after Michael's death. I tried reaching out to Michael's friends for help, but I never dared approach you." James nodded silently. Questions swirled in his mind. How could he not have known? Why didn't Michael tell him about Emily? Did Michael even know about the pregnancy? "You needed support all this time, didn't you? Why didn't you come to me? I would have helped." "I was too afraid," Emily whispered, her head bowed. "You have a reputation for being tough, distant. I heard how you drifted apart from Michael in his final years, and I thought you'd see me as some opportunist." James felt a pang of guilt. Deep down, he knew how distant he'd been from Michael in those last years. Always busy, always traveling. When Michael died, it felt like his world collapsed, but it was really the price of prioritizing business over his son. He looked around the warehouse. Cardboard scraps, a couple of tattered blankets, plastic bags stuffed with rags. This was where his family, his grandson and the mother of his son's child, had been living. The thought of their hardship stung bitterly. "Come with me," James said calmly, though emotions churned inside. "I'm taking you out of here. You shouldn't live like this." Emily looked at Tommy, who glanced between her and James. Then she asked quietly, "What do you want in return?" "Nothing," James replied, his voice almost breaking. "Only that you let me be part of Tommy's life. I'm his grandfather, and I can't let him live in a cold warehouse." A flicker of surprise, then warmth, crossed Tommy's face. He took a small step forward, as if wanting to see James more closely. Emily exhaled heavily, a mix of relief and lingering doubt in her eyes, but she knew they had no other choice. "Okay," she whispered, "but please, don't abandon us later. Tommy's been through so much." James shook his head. "I won't. I promise." To avoid overwhelming Emily and Tommy with the opulence of his mansion, James settled them temporarily in a small but cozy apartment in one of his properties in a quiet Boston neighborhood. He'd bought it years ago as an investment and had it vacated quickly. Within 2 days, he arranged for furniture, groceries, and minor repairs. When Emily and Tommy stepped inside, they looked like they'd entered another world. The furniture, though simple, was new and clean. Warm blankets, modern plumbing, and a small kitchen stocked with food felt like a palace to those used to a damp warehouse. Emily wiped away tears, gazing at the fresh wallpaper and neat curtains. Tommy cautiously touched the sofa, as if afraid to ruin it. James stood back, watching. Guilt gnawed at him for the years they'd spent in poverty while he lived in luxury with staff. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said finally. "Everything's paid for. It's safe, and there's a good school nearby." "Thank you," Emily whispered. "We really need this right now." Tommy seemed to come alive. He explored the rooms, peering out the window at a small playground with swings and a slide. Gathering his courage, he approached James. "Are you really my grandpa?" The question caught James off guard, his breath hitching. For years, he'd longed to call someone family again, always thinking of Michael. Now, fate had given him a grandson he never knew existed. "Yes, Tommy," he replied carefully. "I'm your dad's father, but we've never met because your dad passed away." "Yeah," Tommy said, meeting his eyes. "Mom told me. I'll be here for you now, if you're okay with that." Tommy didn't reply, just lowered his gaze, processing mixed emotions. Their first shared meal in the small kitchen was simple but poignant. James watched Tommy eagerly devour hot soup and sandwiches. Emily ate slowly, occasionally smiling at her son. The atmosphere felt charged, as if something vital and new was taking root. The next day, James and Victor began handling paperwork. They needed to help Emily stabilize her finances and ensure Tommy could attend school without issues like lack of residency. Victor navigated bureaucracy, while James called in favors from contacts to streamline the process. He also hired a tutor, an experienced teacher, to help Tommy catch up on schoolwork after years of inconsistent education. Emily's friend occasionally watched Tommy, but he'd never had steady schooling. He had a lot to make up for. The real transformation happened between James and Tommy. James, who'd lived in a cocoon of grief for 5 years, rediscovered joy in connecting with a child. He showed Tommy new books, shared stories about Michael, how he loved building models, played soccer, and dreamed of driving cross-country to the Grand Canyon. Tommy listened eagerly, soaking up every detail about his father. Sometimes, he'd lean into Emily and quietly ask, "Mom, why did things turn out like this? Why did Dad die before I was born?" Emily struggled to answer, often saying, "That's just how fate works." But she saw James trying to atone for his past through them, and though she still feared it could all collapse, she began to believe he genuinely wanted the best for Tommy. Between business meetings, James visited the apartment, bringing groceries and checking if Emily needed anything. He didn't push, ensuring they felt supported without pressure. Emily grew less guarded, and Tommy looked at James with increasing trust. Weeks into their new, quieter life, a milestone arrived. Tommy asked, "Grandpa, can we all go to Dad's grave together? I want to tell him I have you now, that things will be okay." James froze at Grandpa, his heart swelling with bittersweet joy. "Of course, Tommy," he nodded. "This Sunday." "Yeah," Tommy confirmed, his eyes bright with anticipation. "I'll draw a picture for Dad. We can leave it on his grave." Emily supported the idea. She rarely visited the cemetery, avoiding painful memories, but knew Tommy needed this. James, though a regular visitor, felt nervous. What would it be like to go there with others? But Sunday dawned bright and calm. Tommy wore his cleanest jacket, carefully tucking his drawing, three figures, him, Emily, and James, standing by a blooming tree, with a glowing figure labeled Dad nearby, into his backpack. Everyone in the picture smiled under a big sun. At the cemetery, James helped Emily and Tommy out of the car. The place was unchanged: old maples, birdsong, and pristine gravel paths. At Michael's grave, James paused, sighed, and placed the lilies down. "Hello, son," he said softly. "I'm not alone today." Tommy stepped forward, trembling with emotion, and laid his drawing on the granite. "Dad," he said quietly, "I hope you can hear me. I have a grandpa now. He's good, really. Mom says you were kind, and you wouldn't have left us if you'd lived. I'll try to be a good son and grandson so you're proud." Emily couldn't hold back tears. She knelt, touching the cold stone. "Michael," her voice quavered, "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you about the pregnancy. I loved you so much. Tommy's our piece of you. Forgive me for how things turned out." James stood beside them, his heart pounding with pain and sweetness. It felt like his soul was gently turning over. He squeezed Tommy's shoulder. "Michael," he said, "I wasn't the best father to you, but I'll try to be the best grandfather to your son. I hope you forgive me." A breeze stirred the lilies at the grave's base, and they all felt a quiet warmth, an unspoken presence words couldn't capture. Tommy sniffled. Emily wiped her tears, and James sensed a strange release, as if years of carrying grief alone had lightened. They lingered at the grave, embracing and remembering Michael. In that moment, James felt a spark of light, as if his son was blessing his newfound family. Despite this peace, Emily remained cautious. Used to distrust, especially of those with power and wealth, she feared James might one day decide Tommy belonged in a different world and take him away. But James acted gently, never pushing for them to move into his mansion or dictating their lives. He took Tommy to parks, lakes, or strolls through Boston's historic streets, showing him places the boy never knew existed. Emily loved seeing Tommy return happy, brimming with new experiences. One evening, after a walk, with Tommy asleep, Emily and James sat over tea in the apartment's small kitchen. A single lamp cast a soft glow. Silence stretched, but it was no longer awkward. "James," Emily said, staring into her mug, "I know you're doing a lot for us, and I'm grateful, but I don't want handouts or money for myself. I just want Tommy to have a normal life. Family, care, stability." James set his cup down. "That's why I'm helping. I want Tommy to have what Michael and I missed in our relationship, a sense of not being alone." Emily met his gaze. "You know I can't just move into your mansion, even if you offer. I've lived without luxury too long. I don't want to feel indebted." James nodded. He knew trust wasn't bought with money. It was earned through actions, time, and sincerity. "I'm not rushing you," he said. "But let's agree. I won't force anything, and you won't refuse help out of fear or pride. We'll find a balance that works for you and Tommy." Emily smiled faintly. "Fair enough, but I'll need time to adjust to having any support at all." James returned a small smile, understanding that years of hardship wouldn't vanish overnight. But they now had a reason to try. As Tommy settled into school and their new life, Emily, with James's help, began job hunting. She didn't want to rely on her wealthy father-in-law, even if he was only a figure in her late partner's life. Through James's contacts, she landed a job at a small bakery she'd always dreamed of working in. Tommy, meanwhile, struggled at first to fit in at school. Coming from a different world, he felt like an outsider. But with supportive teachers and a tutor, he quickly caught up. James often picked Tommy up after school, helping with homework. This was new for him. He'd never been hands-on with such tasks. But with Tommy, he found the warmth missing from his life for 5 years. Watching Tommy diligently write or draw, James recalled Michael as a teen, back when they were close, fishing together. Sometimes, Emily noticed James grow pensive, as if haunted by unspoken regrets. One evening, as he lingered at the apartment, she offered, "Stay for tea, James. Tommy's asleep, but I made pancakes." "Thanks," James said, grateful yet hesitant to intrude. They sat quietly until Emily ventured, "I've seen you look sad when you watch Tommy. Are you thinking of Michael?" James sighed, running a hand over his face. "Yeah, I keep thinking I missed so much with him. When Tommy looks at me, I see Michael, the boy I loved endlessly but couldn't keep close. Now I'm trying to make it right with Tommy, and I'm not sure if I'm doing it correctly." I think you are, Emily said gently. Tommy's come alive since he learned he has a grandpa. He never had a dad, and you're giving him some of what he'd have wanted from Michael. I hope so, James nodded. But there's another side. I regret not protecting Michael. I had enough money to give him everything, but I didn't give him what mattered most, my attention. When he died, we weren't on the best terms. Emily lowered her eyes. Michael didn't blame you. He was sad you didn't talk much, said you'd changed, gotten colder chasing success, but he never stopped loving you. Her words pierced James's heart. He looked out the window at the flickering streetlights. Maybe these were the words he'd always needed, that his son still loved him, despite the distance. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for telling me. Months passed. Tommy grew stronger, more outgoing. He made friends at school and joined the soccer team. Emily thrived at the bakery, forming bonds with colleagues and introducing new cake recipes she'd learned over the years. James watched them blossom. Tommy, a child finally given a real childhood, and Emily, a woman finding her footing. He still ran his company but avoided late nights at the office, prioritizing family time. Sometimes he, Emily, and Tommy took trips outside the city, picnicking or strolling through parks when weather permitted. As Tommy's 11th birthday approached, James wanted to throw a proper celebration but feared overwhelming him with extravagance. They settled on a party at a cozy family cafe, inviting a few of Tommy's friends for a fun evening. On the day, Tommy glowed with joy. His classmates and soccer coach gifted him sports gear. Emily gave him a sketchbook and pencils, and James chose a quality soccer ball, knowing Tommy's new passion. The real highlight was Tommy proudly introducing James. "This is my grandpa," he said, beaming, "and my mom, Emily." Many kids had seen James pick Tommy up from school, but hadn't realized he was family. The party became a moment of unity. James saw Tommy shine, soaking in the attention and support he'd lacked for so long. Emily found herself smiling constantly, her heart full for her son. She glanced at James, who smiled reservedly but clearly delighted by his grandson's joy. The celebration was a success, but soon a new question arose. One evening, with Tommy asleep, Emily and James discussed plans over tea. James suggested, "Maybe it's time to think about a more permanent solution. This apartment's fine, but it's rented. Perhaps we could find you and Tommy a better place, or you could move in with me." Emily tensed, worry flickering in her eyes. "Move to your mansion? I don't know." "Look," James said gently, "I'm not pushing, but there's plenty of space in my house. Tommy could have his own room. You wouldn't worry about rent, and we'd spend more time together." Emily sighed. "I get that it'd be easier, but it scares me. You live so differently. Tommy and we've never known luxury. I'm afraid we'd feel out of place or like I'm just a guest in your home." James placed his hand over hers. "I want you to feel like it's your home. Tommy's my grandson, and it's his home too. You're his mother, and I want you there." Emily's eyes shimmered with gratitude and fear. "Give me time to think. I don't want to rush this." "Of course," James said. "I'm not in a hurry. Just know I'm ready to welcome you." The question of moving remained open, lingering in the air. But a thread of trust was forming between James and Emily. Winter approached, and Boston's early dusk, cold winds, and sleet made life less comfortable, especially for those used to scraping by. Tommy started coughing, often running a fever after soccer practice. One evening, his temperature spiked to 102 degrees Fahrenheit, alarming Emily. James rushed them to the hospital in his car. Doctors diagnosed bronchitis and recommended a short hospital stay to prevent complications. Emily sat in the hospital corridor, nervously clutching her jacket. James sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It'll be okay. The doctors say it's not serious if treated properly." "I'm just scared," Emily sighed. "I couldn't even afford proper checkups before, and now I'm terrified of losing this stability." James frowned. "You won't lose anything. I'm here, and I won't let you or Tommy face hardship again." Emily nodded, feeling his reassurance. In that moment, she realized she could rely on him. He wasn't just offering money or shelter. He genuinely cared, staying at the hospital, talking to doctors, handling paperwork. This wasn't the act of someone showing off. When Tommy was discharged days later, James insisted they stay at his mansion temporarily. It was roomier, and he hired a nurse to check on Tommy. Emily agreed reluctantly, prioritizing her son's health. The mansion awed her with its calm grandeur. Once home to James, his wife, Tommy's grandmother, who left years before Michael's death, and Michael. It now housed only a few staff, guards, a gardener, and a cook. Their assigned room was spacious, with a soft carpet and a large window overlooking the garden. Tommy loved the terrace access, though he had to rest for recovery. Emily felt out of place at first. The high ceilings, expensive art, and marble stairs were alien. She struggled to interact with the staff, feeling awkward. But James ensured they felt welcome, surprising Tommy with a new bed and his favorite books. The cook, a kind elderly woman named Margaret, brought warm meals. She'd cooked for Michael as a child and shared fond memories with Emily. "Oh, Michael was such a lively boy, always laughing when I made him pies." Emily felt a wave of bittersweet warmth, realizing how many lives Michael had touched. Tommy recovered steadily, his cough fading. Evenings were spent reading, watching soccer on TV, or chatting with James about school. A familial warmth grew between them. Emily watched, torn between joy at Tommy's happiness and fear that this dream might end. The mansion's opulence intimidated her, making her feel like an outsider. One night, unable to sleep, Emily wandered the mansion's corridors, studying old framed photos. There was young James holding a blonde toddler Michael, a family portrait from a vacation, and a teenage Michael with a school award, James distracted by a phone call even in the picture. It spoke volumes about their strained bond. "Hard to believe it turned out this way, isn't it?" James's quiet voice startled her. She hadn't heard him approach. "Yeah," she whispered, looking down. "Michael looks so happy here. And you're there, but distracted." "I was a fool," James said bitterly. "Michael needed me, and I was on the phone. Now all I have are photos and memories." Emily turned to him. "At least you have Tommy. Michael lives on in him." James's eyes held gratitude. "I know, but I also know Tommy's your life, and I'm thankful you're not pushing me away." "Our life," Emily corrected softly. "If you want it to be." James stepped closer, hesitantly taking her hand. Her heart raced, but she didn't pull away. I do want that," he said, faltering. "I want you and Tommy to be my family, but only if you're ready to accept me as I am. I've made mistakes, missed so much, and I'm trying to make up for it." Emily met his gaze. Over these months, he'd revealed a side she hadn't expected, not the cold billionaire she'd imagined, but a man who'd lost his son, sought redemption, and found purpose in caring for his grandson. She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for giving Tommy what he couldn't even dream of, and for everything else." They stood silently in the corridor, then parted to their rooms, each feeling a new understanding. As Tommy's health improved and winter holidays neared, the question of where to live resurfaced. Emily pondered staying in the mansion, seeing how quickly Tommy recovered and how comfortable he was. The idea of living in a palace scared her, but for her son, she was willing to face her fears. One morning, as James prepared to leave for the office, Emily stopped him. "James, wait. I've been thinking. We could stay here, in your house, if it's not too much trouble. But I need to keep working and have some independence." James smiled, a rare, genuine smile Emily had come to recognize. "Of course, it's my home, and you're not a burden. I'd love for you to stay. It'll be good for Tommy, and I respect your need to work." So, they moved in permanently. Tommy got a room with a garden view, while Emily had a cozy space on the second floor with a desk for her projects. The mansion was no longer silent. Tommy's energy filled it as he explored, finding Michael's old toys in the attic and helping Margaret in the kitchen, asking about pie recipes, or quizzing the gardener about plants. Emily worked mornings at the bakery, returning to Tommy in the evenings. James adjusted his schedule to join them for lunch. Evenings were spent in the living room, talking, watching movies, or laughing over silly moments. For James, this was transformative. Money and power paled against the joy of family dinners and casual chats. One snowy evening, Emily suggested baking a cake together. Tommy eagerly helped, and James, drawn by their laughter, joined in. "Got a job for me?" he asked, smiling. "Sure," Emily laughed. "Hold the bowl for Tommy." James, inexperienced in the kitchen, fumbled but enjoyed it. They laughed when batter nearly spilled, and Tommy got cream on his shirt. The cake wasn't perfect, but was delicious. "We don't make this often," James said, cutting a slice. "I don't remember baking as a kid." Tommy, licking a spoon, asked, "Did Dad like sweets?" Emily and James exchanged smiles. "He did. Emily said. Loved chocolate cakes, though I only baked for him a couple times before he passed. Did he help? Tommy pressed. Sometimes, James said, his brow furrowing with memory. But I was often too busy to notice. Tommy's face fell, sensing James's pain. Emily quickly shifted to tasting the cake, lightening the mood. Later, as spring brought warmer days, they took walks in a nearby park. Tommy rode his scooter while Emily and James talked, sharing stories about Michael, his childhood quirks, dreams, and struggles. Emily opened up about life after Michael's death, how Tommy kept her going. Their bond deepened, not just as in-laws, but as people united by shared loss and love for Tommy. They learned to say thank you, I'm sorry, and I cherish what we have. Formalities faded. Tommy thrived, excelling in school and soccer. Emily's bakery job grew into a small business venture, with James offering a no-interest loan. One night, unable to sleep, Emily stepped onto the balcony and found James stargazing. Can't sleep? He asked. Yeah, she admitted. I'm thinking about the stars. I'm worried about our future, Emily said. Everything feels so good now. What if it falls apart? James frowned. Why would it? I don't know, she sighed. Life's unpredictable. I thought Michael and I would be together forever, and then he was gone. James was silent for a moment, then said softly, I get your fear. I'm scared too, scared I don't deserve this second chance. But life's one shot. Let's believe we can be there for each other. No guarantees can erase the past, but we can build a future. Emily's heart wavered between fear and hope. Okay, she whispered. I'll try to live in the moment. Just don't disappear. James placed a hand on her shoulder. I won't. I promise. The wind brushed their hair, and they stood in silence, knowing promises were fragile but determined to try. Years passed. The mansion became a home, filled with Tommy's drawings, fresh flowers, and the smell of Emily's baking. James scaled back his business, focusing on family and charity. He and Tommy visited animal shelters, fulfilling Tommy's dream. Emily's bakery thrived, and she gained confidence as a businesswoman. James still visited Michael's grave every Sunday, often with Tommy, sometimes Emily. They no longer wept bitterly but shared stories of Michael, feeling his presence in their bond. On Michael's death anniversary, they brought lilies and wildflowers Tommy picked. Dad, Tommy said, placing the flowers down, things are good. Grandpa and I watch soccer. Mom makes great pies, and I'm healthy. I hope you're proud. Emily touched the stone, whispering apologies, and James promised Michael to be a better grandfather. One stormy evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Tommy suggested sharing dreams. I want to be a pro soccer player and build an animal shelter, he said, then added shyly. And I want us to always be a family. James's heart swelled. That's my dream too. Being together, supporting each other. Emily gazed at the fire. I want Tommy to grow up happy, to have what Michael didn't, and for you, James, to find peace. They sat, sharing hopes and memories, growing closer. Years later, Tommy played city-level soccer, Emily ran a successful bakery, and James lived simply, cherishing family. The mansion was alive with love, laughter, and the promise of a future built together. This story shows that even the deepest grief can yield to love if you open your heart. James, once lonely in wealth, found family through his lost son. Emily overcame despair to trust again. Tommy gained a world of possibilities. Challenges lay ahead, but together, bound by love and memory, they were unstoppable. Thank you for reading. Share your thoughts, subscribe to Unbelievable But True, and share this story. Your support inspires us to create more. Check the description for our story catalog. See you next time.